On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show.
Tell me what that is.
You mean stylistically, what kind of music?
Yeah.
Jazz, rock, classical, bebop, modern, bluegrass, country.
Wowie.
It's just a combination of everything that I've ever played, and the tune was written by the mandolin player.
Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace at 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. My show is predicated on the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage, and the ongoing story of real music made by real artists. The last time I spoke with my guest, he hit me to Herbie Nichols and Village Music and the album Baseball, which I still haven't found. Since that time, I have been woodshedding in many different regions of the country, talking to Charlie Daniels about his bluegrass upbringings in Appalachia, or maybe Bill Keith, who's the master of the banjo. It could have been talking with Peter Rowan before a concert I promoted for him in Sahuarita, where he talked about why the Outlaws migrated from Texas to Stinson Beach. Dog music is dog grass, dog jazz, fluid improvisational melodic invention. It's not a bastion of hard bop like Horace Silver or Art Blakey, but it has that swing element thanks to the drumming of George Marsh at City Winery, not the Jabberwocky where Richard Green almost dislodged Herb Peterson's eyeball with an upbow. My guest has forged relationships with so many artists from so many spectrums that there is no label to define his music. Acousticity is a big part of it. The plucking of the strings, playing a Milt Jackson tune, or klezmer music with Hal Blaine at the Tucson Jewish Community Center. That lifestyle catches up with you. The road can eat you up, so you have to constantly retool, reinvent, and look towards the light. He's a grandfather now with incentive to teach his grandkids about good rhythm, good syncopation, and letting the music breathe. When he was winning the Union Grove Fiddlers Convention in 1964, the original masters of bluegrass were still thriving. Father Bill, Vassar, Chubby, Lamar, and Tex, the same way it was in jazz with Dizzy and Duke, Train and Miles, and the same in soul with Ray Charles and Sam Cooke. Those cats have long since left the bandstand, and the baton has been handed off to people like my guest. He knows he's a link in the chain for future generations of musicians and music enthusiasts. He thumbed his nose at the record business a long time ago and has made a living playing music that is true to him, with the trusty Bob Shoemaker at the helm at 1750 Arch Records. Back at it again, David Dog Grisman, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
How you doing, Jake?
Good to hear you, man. How are you?
I'm fine, but after that introduction, I don't know, man.
Did you...
Getting this swelled head here.
You know, when I say, I mean, it's become, it's been a long time, but I've been doing a lot of my homework since I last talked to you. And, you know, I don't know. Did you catch that music clip we came out of the intro with?
Yeah, I know. That's from that strings thing that some oil company put out.
Yeah, exactly. Standard.
Yeah, Richard Green takes all the credit, and then finally says, "Oh, and the tune was written by the mandolin player." Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard, because you know what? I wanted to make sure that was discernible. He dogs rag, and just for I don't know if you remember Ellen Kearney. I don't know that name, but she was on guitar.
Ellen Kearney, yeah.
And she's on guitar, and then a guy that I love, but Joe Carroll was playing great bass on that tune too as well.
Yeah, he was my original bass player, and Richard and I had a band right before that, the Great American Music Band. It was that gig, yeah.
I love how he couldn't even say the tune was written by David Grisman. He's like, it was written by the mandolin player. It's like,
right. Yeah, right. Thank you, Richard. Well, I got even.
You know what? You were all over this album because there's even a more classic clip on the side 4 with Vassar with a conglomerate.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's with Sandy Rothman. It says it's with Sandy Rothman, but I'm going to send the record to Craig, and you guys can vet this because it sounds to me like Jerry, but Jerry's not listed on it. It's John Conn, Sandy Rothman, David, and Vassar, and they do. I don't know. You have to listen to it, but you were all over this album, and I tried to find.
Well, I think Sandy Rothman played guitar.
He did. He absolutely did.
And Jerry played banjo.
He's just not listed in the credits on this. I just love
right. Maybe he had some record company thing.
Well, we have no time to waste here with David Grisman. I've been thinking about this a little bit. I wanted to ask you, did you ever either collaborate or have in your record collection any black mandolin players?
Oh yeah, well Yank Rachel. I met Yank, and actually he sat in on a gig in Indianapolis a long time ago. He recorded with Sleepy John Estes in the 20s and 30s. And, he was probably the best known black mandolin player. I lent him my Gibson Lloyd Laura F5 at the 66 Newport Folk Festival. And I'm sitting out in the audience, and he starts waving it around like he's going to throw it into the audience. Almost gave me a young heart attack. But there was Johnny Young. I never met Johnny Young, but he was another great black mandolin player, Afro-American mandolin player, and of course Rich Del Grosso, my friend Rich Del Grosso, is white, but he sounds black. He's from Detroit, and of course there's Howard Armstrong. Howard Armstrong played fiddle and mandolin from Martin, Bogan, and Armstrong. So I could never play like that, but I really appreciate that contribution to mandolin literature.
Okay, so let's just break that down because I'm so happy you mentioned my man Johnny Young because I found this album on Bluesway not soon after we did our first conversation. I said I mean it's called it's on like ABC Bluesway from '73. I can't keep my foot from jumping, Johnny Young.
Oh yeah,
and it's just it's burning, man. So when you say I appreciate their contributions, can you talk about what they did that was different? Because when he's playing the mandolin, it really does sound different to a listener.
Well, it's it's the blues, the real blues played on a mandolin. It's just a I can I can learn the notes, I can play the notes, but they have a certain feeling in that music, that it's just I have a different feeling. But hey, that's what makes the world go round. I love that stuff, and of course, a lot of jug band music is related to that. Gus Cannon, who was a banjo player, but I think there was a guy named Coley Jones I think he was the mandolin player in the Dallas String Band, and they made some great records too. It's very obscure stuff, though. You got to really search that out.
What was the what was the last record you picked? You still collect records once in a while?
Oh yeah. In fact, I was listening to your introduction. You said you're still looking for baseball.
I'm dying for it. I'm dying for
that
it.
That record apparently originally was called "The Sound of a Bass," and I believe you can find it on maybe Amazon or eBay under that title, Francois Rabat.
Exactly.
The sound of a bass. It's actually the same record that was retitled Baseball when they put it out in the United States. And it's a nice. I think it's on Phillips. It's a really nice CD. I need reading glasses to get the number off of this, but it's a great CD.
What have you been listening to? Like, what kind of vinyl have you been picking up lately? Like, what's been good?
Actually, it's funny. I just bought a turntable last week,
Nice.
or a couple of weeks ago, a new turntable. And oddly enough, I've been buying some of the records that, I had originally. Like, I just got a copy of the first bluegrass record I ever heard. It's called Mountain Music Bluegrass Style, and it was produced by Mike Seeger. It came out on Folkways around 1959. And it's an incredible record. And, I've been listening to some, I've got a lot of vinyl here, although a lot of my collection went bye-bye through various moves. And I started giving away a lot of, I inherited a record collection, and my son Sam really got into vinyl, especially country music and bluegrass the whole time, and I let him go through this big collection and a couple of his friends, because it's important that the younger generation discover this music, and a lot of it is still only on vinyl.
I completely agree. They claim that there's more out there than ever before in the digital land, and I don't know, for some reason it seems more streamlined and restricted, and most of really the heady stuff you can't touch on digital. It's just nice to hear that you're...
There are some really great sets, CD sets. It's JSP label, and there's some the Complete Blind Blake, Memphis Mini, Lionel Hampton, Stan Kenton, all kinds of stuff. And old time music, there's a 4 CD set of Gid Tanner and Skillet Lickers, Charlie Poole. There's a lot of stuff available, but still, there's a lot of stuff that was really only recorded on LP. That's quite valuable, and it's kind of a nice way to listen to music. With I guess now everybody, or not everybody, but most people, download songs, or build their own playlists, is kind of making their own records, which is fine. But a lot of thought went into making an LP. It was a new idea, and first they kept it to like 6 songs a side. Folkways really kind of went off and just crammed as much music as they could onto the sides of an LP, which really is about 45 minutes max that you can fit onto a 33 1/3 LP. But, so you would program both sides, and that kind of was a way of thinking about, listening to music, that hadn't been done before. And now that's been displaced by CDs, which hold about 80 minutes max. Of course, a lot of CDs only hold 30 or 40 minutes, but you can get 80 minutes, almost just under 80, 79.8 or something. And so that kind of in a way that's, I like the smaller dose, a side of an LP. About 20 minutes is a good amount of time to listen to something and then take a break.
Well, listen, we had a lot of fun with David last time, a game called Name That Tune, and I'll tell you, we got one lined up for you right now. So settle in, and then we'll come back and break it down.
Okay, I'll try.
All right, Mr. Grisman, you want to give that a guess?
That sounds familiar. It's possibly me, but possibly not.
Oh, it's possibly definitely you. And I feel so gratified. I just love doing. For the audience, last time we played a really random album on Reprise, Nancy Michaels' album, when David was just fanning out the mandolin. But this time, found this for 99 cents in Goodwill about 2 years ago. It's an album that you were on called Who's That Knocking? And Other Bluegrass Country.
Oh, really? That's on that, huh?
Hazel Dickens and Alice Gerard.
Yeah.
And that
must be Lamar Greer and
you're darn right.
Chubby Wise, I guess.
You are darn right. And the name of that tune was one of the only instrumentals on there. It was called Difficult Run.
Yeah, that's what fooled me, because I think of them as singers.
Well, I was trying to. Yeah, I knew you knew.
I completely forgot that we cut an instrumental on that album. It must be written by Lamar Greer.
I'm not. I didn't look to see who got that. It just says it's just so wonderful down here. It says David Grisman is a mandolin player for the New York Ramblers, the fine bluegrass group that took first place in the band contest at the Union Grove Fiddlers Convention. But Hazel Dickens and Alice Gerard had not showed up on my, and that was also recorded and edited by.
Well, it was Alice Foster then.
Who can you talk about how they fit into the whole paradigm of bluegrass country music?
Well, when I was a teenager and first got interested in bluegrass music, you couldn't. It was hardly anywhere, but it was in the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. area. And so I used to occasionally take the Greyhound bus down there. Mm-hmm. And Hazel Dickens was one of those folks that you could crash on her sofa. There was a network of bluegrass people, and I met Hazel in that Baltimore scene, and she was a great person, and just a friend to anyone that was interested in bluegrass. So I knew her before I even knew she could sing or play the bass. And then I met Alice. She was married, I think, to a man named Jeremy Foster, and who was tragically killed in a car accident. And I think I met her around that time at a picking party in Washington, D.C., and she'd probably remember better, but I think they were starting to put their little thing together, and maybe they hired me to play some gigs with them before we made that album. But my friend Peter Siegel produced that. I think it was for Verve Folkways, where folk music was starting to really catch on. This was probably around 1964, 65.
65, yep.
And Verve, which was kind of a more commercial label, I think it was a subsidiary of MGM Records. They must have made some kind of deal with Folkways to produce some albums that would get maybe broader distribution.
I knew that if I played a tune with their singing, I'm like, it's a dead giveaway. So I think there's
right. You fooled me again, you clever boy.
I'm batting at
When
baseball.
Craig told me you were a young guy. I thought you were about as old as me, knowing as much as you do.
Well, actually, I'm just really focused in on this period of time when, as Peter Rowan, as we'll hear him later, talk about when real music really ruled the day. And it's 65 through 75. So I mean, if you want to get me out in the 30s or 40s, or in that range, I'm going to be very vulnerable. But was that the first time you ever played with Lamar on this record?
It's hard for me. I can't say. It seems like I knew him before that. He was playing with, I guess, was that from 65, that record?
Yeah, you're spot on. Well, okay, so this was originally issued in 65. I have a reissue from 78 on Folkways. That's what I'm holding in my hand, but the original was 65, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think he was playing with, possibly that was a little before he joined Bill Monroe, around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I probably knew him a little bit before that, but that was recorded in the church in Washington, D.C. Of course, the big thrill for all of us was getting to play with Chubby Wise, the original bluegrass fiddle player, or at least the fiddle player that was in the classic bluegrass band with Flatt and Scruggs,
right?
Chubby Wise and Bill Monroe. That is that's what started it all, in my opinion.
David, I wanted to ask you, I think it's important. I talk to a lot of my younger friends, some guys that are just prolific guitar players or, just musicians in general. When they talk about rhythm, and when your name gets brought up, they just say, Grisman is, he's a badass because he has just incredible rhythm. And I talked to John Abercrombie about it and other guys that play more electric music. And, can you talk about how you developed your rhythm, where you think you grew the most, and how you got experience to become such a rhythmic player?
Well, I think you got to pay attention to the fine points. A lot of people kind of gloss over things a little bit, and they think, well, I've got good rhythm. But, you can get that, excuse the expression, you can get it tighter than a gnat's ass. It's the guy, there's just a few guys that can get it down to that magic level where they're just, where the beats are just so well placed. And of course, different kinds of music, different styles of music have different feels and different kind of rhythmic attitudes. And that's a whole other thing, too. But, I always paid attention to what was inspiring me, records. I would listen. I remember I'd try and play along with records, and I tried to play along with a lot of Flatt and Scruggs records because they didn't have much mandolin on them. Mm-hmm. And I immediately noticed, man, I'm behind the beat.
Wow.
So you have to be very self-critical.
Right.
You have to really go into it and say, I know nothing. I'm going to learn from these masters. And pay attention to what they're doing, and really noticing the real subtle things. And of course, everybody's got a different inbred feel, rhythmic feel, I think, that they're born with. And but I got real interested in bluegrass music, and so I kind of honed in on that. When I saw Bill Monroe play, Bill Monroe contributed what they call the chop, so like the backbeat on a snare drum in bluegrass, and that kind of gradually developed in his playing. When he started playing with his brother, it was just a guitar and a mandolin, so he was mostly playing more kind of liquid rhythm, like rolling along, kind of like a strumming, but not insinuating that backbeat. And as he developed his various bands, that chop became more defined. And by the time I first heard Bill Monroe live, which was 1961, he was, he was laying it down. And probably a lot of the reason is because in that period, he was picking up musicians left and right. He didn't have a permanent band, so he really showed you where the beat was. Now, whether you picked up on that or you had to, If you were playing with Bill Monroe and you were not where he wanted you to be, he would just pound that thing in your face until you got with it.
Oh, no, we're cooking, right? Yeah. No,
And so, I've always, tried to focus a lot on the rhythm, the time, and, I'm easily thrown, actually, because, I'm also listening. You don't want to just be a jackhammer or a metronome, music's got to breathe. So, I've always listened to everything that's going on around me, and sometimes, that can be confusing. Hey, it's just a lifelong process, you just gotta work on it, and then, as a band leader, as somebody who wants to hear his music played a certain way in a certain time with certain accents, I focus, I give a lot of guys a hard time. Sometimes we get into arguments about it, everybody thinks they've got perfect time.
No, I know. This is so important because one of the reasons I've crossed the credibility threshold with the jazzers or yourself or other people like that is because I'm a listener. I'm not a musician. So I'm fascinated by these intricacies, and I just why don't we relate it to the sextet that you have now. I wanted you to talk a little bit about those gigs and also how you communicate with those guys that they need to be self-critical and they need to focus on stuff.
Actually, they know. That's one. I've got a great band, and they know. Mm-hmm. We all know. It's not just a question of them and me. You have to keep working on it. You're only as good as your last note you played. It's gone, and you gotta. A painter gets to paint a painting, and then he's finished, and you hang it on the wall and look at it. But a musician, even if he makes a record and he's done with that, the next gig, he's got to really go up there on a stage and paint that painting all over again from scratch. Now, for the first time in over 10 years, I have a band, a sextet, we all live in the Bay Area. So we actually rehearse just about every week. And if everybody can't make it, I'll rehearse with two guys. I'll rehearse with one guy. But there's so many things to work on in music and in our repertoire. I've got a huge repertoire by now. And, there are two guys that came into the band just a year ago. And so, you start with a list of tunes, and they all, even if they're simple tunes, they have tricky little things you got to remember. Arrangements, intros, transitions, whatever, so we're always working on this stuff, and everybody in the band really, we might you know, everybody has their own kind of approach to music. You know, they're not all exactly like my approach, you know. So to bring them in line, there's a lot of psychology involved sometimes, you know, because, you know, I've got some guys in there. My bass player, Jim Kerwin, has been with me for, you know, over 30 years. My flute player's been over 25 years. And George Marsh, the drummer, he's been here 10 years this time, and he was with us in the 1980s. So, and Chad Manning, the fiddle player, well, he's been playing bluegrass with me for the past dozen years, but I realized last year that, man, he really can play this dog music great. And then guitarist George Cole just joined us beginning of last year, and he's really into it. He was an electric guitar player for years, and he had an epiphany about 10 years ago. He went to hear Borelli Legren. The next day, he took all his amps and electric guitars down and traded them in for a Selmer guitar and got into gypsy jazz, and he's totally into the acoustic music and my music. And, you know, he's just, you know, wanting to get on top of this stuff. And, you know, there's just a lot of different styles involved. You know, there's the bluegrass influence stuff, swing influence stuff, Latin influence stuff, gypsy stuff. So all of that requires a slightly different approach, you know. And you know, I work on it with him, and, you know, the stuff that bothers me, I talk about, you know. And, but, you know, I know that, you know, this guy here likes to improvise a lot. This guy here likes to, you know, do this a lot. You got to kind of work it, you know, so that everybody has fun too. You know, I don't want to force somebody into a mold that doesn't really fit them. You know,
Oh, absolutely.
in other words, part of this music I want to be exactly, you know, arranged a certain way. You know, it might be a certain line. I want everybody to phrase that the same way, or, you know, a certain accent, certain parts. But a lot of the rest of it, I like to have that person's personality in there. And, you know, anybody that ends up in my band ends up, you know, joins the band because I like their playing already.
Exactly.
I'm not going to invite somebody who's playing I don't relate to. They already have something that I want. So, you know, I don't want to stifle that part of it.
Well,
So
I also, yeah, continue.
You know, we have a good time basically because the music is, you know, if you work on it, and you know, it's a progressive thing. It keeps getting better, even though we're old guys now. You know, this music keeps progressing, you know, and it's exciting. I mean, we play in the living room, and everybody really gets off, you know, musically, because we're focusing on that. You know, it's a done deal by now. You know, you can't stay in somebody's band for 25 or 30 years unless you're either getting paid huge amounts of money, which is not happening occasionally, but, you know, I don't work that much, so it's kind of a labor of love.
Oh,
and
you
this
know,
is something that we've been working on for decades. And it's, and there's room for everybody to express themselves, and at the same time, I'm getting my tunes played kind of the way I want to hear them.
You know, I've been doing quite a bit of work since the last time I talked to the dog, and this is not Name That Tune. This is Name That Voice, David. So I want you to take a listen to this, and then we'll come back and break it down.
You usually fool me, Jake.
I'm gonna do. No, this is not gonna happen, but this is gonna be good. So enjoy.
Okay.
I did. I made a batch of brownies when I was out in California, and they were powerful brownies. So,
But Earl actually ingested one. I mean, he took it down.
Yeah. Well, on my way back from California, I stopped at their house, Earl and Louise, and I was talking about how we played in a couple of those clubs in San Francisco where you could just smell the pot in the air.
Sure.
And Earl had played in those clubs too. Was it the Avalon Ballroom, one of the big ones?
The Fillmore, yeah, all those clubs. Yeah, sure.
And he said, but he didn't smoke anymore, so he couldn't check it out. And I said, well, you don't really have to smoke it. You can eat it. And in fact, I've got some brownies out in the car, and if you wanted to try it out. So I brought in 3 brownies, and I decided I'd eat one just to show him that it was cool. I mean, that it,
Yeah, right.
wasn't going to keel over. And then he ate one, and Louise decided to keep hers till later. And one point he turned to Louise and said, Louise, the color is fading in and out of the TV. And she said, but Earl, this commercial is in black and white.
No, we talk. I got to tell you, I mean, I don't know when the last time you talked to Bill, but he's in.
I called him on his birthday, December 20th, and we visited him not too long ago in Woodstock. Yeah, we're wishing him the best. He's got lung cancer. He's a smoker, not just pot.
No, but he's going like. I mean, to me, it was essential when you told me we were talking about how hip the time was, and even the squarest cats in the world were going to take chances. And I had him live on the radio, and I guess my overarching question is, David, you did that gig with Del McCurry in '65 up at Rensselaer, I think it was, Troy, New York.
Yeah, 66. Yeah.
And you and then you had a mutual friend, Eric Anderson. You guys were going back and forth the West Coast and the East Coast. I've been spending a lot of time on my show lately talking about mind expansion through psychedelics. And I wanted to ask you, did you ever get a chance to go to Millbrook, or did you get to hang with Timothy Leary with Rinsler, or did you go do any of the acid tests in California, anything like that?
No, LSD wasn't really my thing. I think I took LSD 3 times. I got a real benefit out of it. The first time I took it was, I guess, 67, and I had some of Owsley's acid that somebody sent me. And there were 3 of us, and neither my wife at the time and my best friend, and we all decided to take it, but on separate days. And I was the first.
Oh boy!
And and I was like 20, maybe 22 years old, and I was smoking carrot and cigarettes at the time, and I reached for one and lit it and was immediately repulsed by it and never smoked again. So that's one real benefit that I got out of LSD. But I found I took it maybe once or twice more. It is like, this is the same as, this is that place. I just felt I didn't need to go there anymore. I've been a pot smoker for 52 years.
Right.
I'm a card-carrying one, and I spent a lot of time in Washington State as well, and congratulations, Alaska and Washington, D.C. this year. I really think it's a really beneficial, medicinal, great thing.
I just want to say...
But not for everybody, and not while you're driving, and not, but I had a friend that, was also a very well-known musician who said, I smoke pot before, during, and after everything. It's brought me a lot of insight, as well as being extremely relaxing and pleasurable.
Can you talk a little bit more specifically about how it helps you relax? Like, do you find yourself writing better? I know with me, I get my monologues. I mean, the monologue that I wrote for you, it just allows me to sort of access, a sub-level, and I don't get caught up with any of my neuroses, so I'm able to just kind of flow. I just would love you to talk about how marijuana has sort of helped you with creative-wise.
Well, I think it allows you, one thing it does for me, especially when I was making a lot of records and listening the takes of a song over and over and over again, or playing them over and over and over again, it kind of gives you a fresh, kind of new look at something that you've been, that might otherwise get more boring,
Exactly.
It also to me is kind of like a big leveler, sometimes I'm traveling a lot. I'm in this place, then I'm in that place, and I'm in this airport, then I'm, and it helps kind of smooth it over for me.
I love yeah, go ahead.
One big peanut butter sandwich,
I really wanted to ask you this question since the last time we spoke, but, for so many, especially when you had your own bands, in the mid-'70s, and you would go to Japan, and it was a 5-piece, and then later on, you continued on. Can you talk about when you made the conscious decision to actually put a drummer into dog music, and why you did that?
Right. Well, let's see. Okay, I got, part of it was, for commercial reasons, in a sense, because, so I had 9 years I didn't have no drums. My idea was to have a rhythm mandolin player. And this is kind of the same idea that Django Reinhardt, he said to Stefan Grappelli, because he was a real strong rhythm player, and I loved playing rhythm in a bluegrass band behind everything else.
Exactly.
When it comes time for me to play a solo, that goes away. I mean, at least that mandolin thing. And so I thought, wow, it'd be great if I could have that behind me. And Django told Stefan the same thing. He said, when you play, you have me behind you. When I play, the way he did it was he hired 2 guitar players. He figured he was the equivalent of 2 guitar players. Well, in my opinion, it ain't quantity, it's quality. So, what I really wanted is probably myself playing behind me. But I kind of, had 2 guys. First, Todd Phillips, who was really a bass player, but he showed up in a mandolin class I was giving on a weekly basis, and he was my A student, and I decided to train him to play the rhythm parts that I was hearing for these songs. And also, like Vivaldi, realized that 2 mandolins playing in harmony sounded good. So that was my initial concept. And of course, the first quintet, Tony Rice joined the band, and he was a rhythm monster. And he always told me, you don't need 2 mandolins. You're enough.
Yeah, right.
Well, with him, yeah. But, I still like the concept. So for 9 years, I basically, and then Todd, ultimately moved to bass, and Mike Marshall came in playing second mandolin. And he's a great mandolin player, but, he was, wanting to play solos and was great at playing solos. And, you know, I was always bugging these guys about their rhythm playing, you know. And, of course, you know, a lot of young musicians, they want to play solos. So night after night, Mike would blow me away playing his solos, and, you know, he'd get the applause. But I figured, you know, I was the Leo DeRocher, you know. It was my team anyway, so I didn't mind that too much.
I love that. I love it.
You know, hey, as long as somebody gets gets applause, you know. But,
Right.
you know, after, you know, and then I made my first dog music album for a small label, Kaleidoscope. In fact, they started the label to record that music. And then, surprisingly, it sold a whole bunch of copies, about 50,000, and A&M noticed that, and they signed me. You know, they were a major label, and I made Hot Dog for them, and I had a 2-record deal, and then they decided to, it was A&M Horizon, and they were closing that down, but the guy that started it, Tommy LaPuma, who was George Benson's producer, he went over to Warner Brothers, and he brought me over to Warner Brothers, and I made 4 albums for them. And by the time that 4th album, they realized I wasn't selling enough records, so they wanted to drop me. And I had a 5-record deal, so I said, okay, well, you can drop me, but you have to pay me for this record. And they said, well, if we're going to pay you, we'll take the record. We'll make the record. So by then I was feeling pressure, so I said, well, I've never recorded with drums. What the hell? You know?
Hal Blaine.
And this was, you know, I mean, years before,
Mm-hmm.
when I had been with Richard Green, we got, trying to remember the guy's name. He was a big executive at Warner Brothers at the time.
No, we got to get this name. We got to get this name.
Producer.
Yeah.
He was Tina Turner's producer. And he was talking to, he wanted to sign us, but he wanted to add percussion at the time, and I was dead set against that.
Right.
You know, probably, who knows, you know, what, I mean, it was silly, but, you know, I was a stubborn guy. So by 19, I guess this would be around 83, 84, I decided to add drums, and the drummer I picked was Hal Blaine, who I had done sessions with, who I found to be a really versatile musical guy who had made just tons of hit records. I think Hal made 365 gold records. And I brought, you know, the band down to, it was a studio that was out in the hills of Los Angeles or Hollywood, somewhere down there, and we just stayed there for a week and made this record called Acousticity, which was, you know, kind of my take on electricity, you know.
I listened to it last night, and Hal Blaine is on. He's just he is such a cat. The whole album burns, and it's kind of it's got a swing, funky little. It's great. It's got a little bit of everything. But
a lot of different grooves. I mean, Hal, you know, there's several aspects, obviously, to musicianship, and one is technique, which you got to have, but the other is just taste, or what to play. And most of this rock and roll, bluegrass, country, blues, swing, all these, you know, American musics are, you know, people make up their own part, you know.
Exactly.
And Hal was a genius at finding the right part for a song. But he also told me when I first walked in, he said, hey, you can tell me anything. Please tell me if you like it, you don't like it. I'm here to make you happy. So, you know, that was a given. But he never, I doubt if he ever played anything that I didn't like, you know.
Well, he said something.
He's so tasteful. He could, you know, he would listen to the song, and then he'd write out his part. and or map out the song. And from then on, every take was perfect.
When I talked to him, I did about since I talked to you, I did about 3 or 4 interviews with him, and he.
Oh, great. Great.
He's and he talked about this tour that you went on, and I just was loving it because, I mean, talk about David Grisman is an impresario. You see Mike Marshall burning up there, and you're like, I'm just going to be Leo DeRoche or Tommy. I'm the manager. It's cool. You got Blaine. He's telling me, I don't have the clip lined up, but he's talking about, basically during every set or every show, when you were playing, you go into these different venues, and he would get up and do stand-up comedy for like 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, he's a great storyteller. In fact, I produced his comedy record.
I don't think I knew that.
You don't know that?
I did.
You got the copy. In fact, there's 2 of them. There's an actual physical record that and nobody at Acoustic Disc wanted to put this and wanted me to do this, but it was my company. It's called Badoom. I'll have to make sure you get a copy of that, man. Well, it's got drums and show. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
And then there's one that I put together I had 4 live sessions. I had him in my studio and had a big outer room, which I could fit about 15 people in chairs. And he would do like an hour of telling jokes. And we'd record him and the audience. And he did 4 shows like that. And then we made this comedy album, and he played a bunch of drum stuff. And, of course, it didn't sell very well, but, Hal didn't promote it enough, But then I put out a second volume of it on acousticoasis.com. It's called Hal Blaine Strikes Again. And there's just more. That's all jokes. And he's a great joke. And I've actually, picked it up from him because it's just, as he would say, it was a way of breaking the ice on a lot of these recording sessions, He would get everybody laughing. In fact, every day I get about at least 2 or 3 jokes from Hal Blaine. Every single day. In fact, if you got a minute,
yeah,
I'll tell you one that I got recently.
Go ahead.
A story about studio musicians in L.A. and they're getting older. They're about 50 years old. And they decide to have every 10 years they're going to get together and have a luncheon. And they're trying to figure out where they're going to go. And they decide they're going to go to the Sportsman's Lodge because the waitresses there have big breasts and they got a lot of really cool kinds of beer. Okay?
Yep.
10 years later, they're 60 years old, and they're trying to figure out where to go, and they decide they're going to go to the Sportsman's Lodge because it's reasonably priced and it has good food. 10 years later, they're 70. They're trying to figure out where to go. They decide they're going to go to the Sportsman's Lodge because it's got wheelchair access and convenient parking. And finally, 10 years later, they're 80 years old, and they're trying to figure out where to go, and they decide they're going to go to the Sportsman's Lodge because they've never been there before.
Blaine is just on. He's still on fire, and he's he
just won a Grammy.
Well, and the other thing is that I love about him, and I know you'll relate to this, is that when I was talking to him, he did all the drumming on those Beach Boy records, and it was before the accompanist ever got credit on the back of the liner notes. And I said, "Didn't you get insecure? Did you get upset about that?" And he's like, we were all Julius Wechter, it was Jimmy Bond, Emil Richards. He goes, we were all seeing our families move up in society. We were getting bigger houses. We weren't all that into having our names put up there. But that guy, I mean, the density of his resume and his collection is phenomenal. And and just a very decent human being.
Yeah, he is. He's the humblest guy. We played a gig at the Marin County Fair, and he was the first guy there. When I showed up, he was sweeping the stage. with a broom.
Unreal. On.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I want to play you one more. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. That reminds me just a little anecdote about the late, great Pete Seeger,
Please.
who was predeceased by his incredible brother, Mike, who passed away a few years ago. And there was a memorial for Mike, and Tracy and I went to it. And it was just a small group of friends and family seated in a room with a bunch of folding chairs, just kind of in a circular, several circular rows of folding chairs. And Pete Seeger was there. He was about 90. And people spoke, and after it was over, they said, well, we have to put the chairs back. It was so it was like a church or something, we have to. And, man, the first guy folded up about 4 chairs and grabbed them was Pete Seeger.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, he probably put away more chairs than anybody.
Again, I'm on a time. I could talk to David for 2 hours, and can you talk, just as we wrap up here, part 2, a little bit about your this upcoming year, your expectations, kind of some of the events, ultimately, just one thing. I really, I want to figure out a way to. I'll get you on a Greyhound bus down to Tucson. I got to hang with you, man. We got to put some records on. So take us through But I mean, what are some of the highlights?
You can come out here too,
I got mouths to feed here. I got 2 young daughters.
Good for you.
No, that's what I wanted to ask you. Forget, you can talk about 2 things. Okay, one. Give me a couple highlights of your upcoming year musically, and then also talk about what you do with your grandkids to get them to be music enthusiasts.
Well, you can lead a horse to water, but a pencil must be lead. But, coming up, I'm playing a bunch of gigs this year, as I did towards the end of last year with my old friend Del McCurry, just the 2 of us. And that's been a real treat. And we've got, in fact, those are the next gigs I have, sort of the middle of, or the 3rd week in March. We've got 4 gigs. And I've got gigs coming up later with my sextet. It starts in April. And we're doing hopefully adding more. I mean, hey, I'm available, friends. The sextet, that's my, the music that I write and have been working on for, 40 years or almost. And then I have a bluegrass band, David Grisman Bluegrass Experience, and that includes my son Sam, and that's something I always look forward to. That's real hardcore traditional bluegrass. And, I think, and I occasionally do a trio with great guitarist Jim Hurst and my son Sam. It's called the Folk Jazz Trio. So between all of that and, occasionally play with Andy Statman or Frank Vignola or Martin Taylor. John Sebastian and I usually play a few gigs every year. So it's, and all of these bands and groups and duos have different repertoires. So that really keeps me on my toes, Well,
I'll tell you one thing right now, David. Is the sextet planning any Sonoma County city winery gigs in late summer? Because I might just I'm going to have to come to see you.
I think we're going to be we're going to play in Rocky Glass.
And where's that?
In July. That's in Colorado.
In July. Was that Red Rocks or some other fest in?
It's Rocky Glass. It's in Lyons, Colorado. It's a really nice venue. It's a festival. The same guy that puts on the Telluride Festival. It's a little smaller than that one. let's see. Craig would,
Yeah, no, I'll get with Miller. It's just Dave.
But hey,
yeah.
I'd love to meet you in person, and I really appreciate what you're doing and the depth that you're going to and the thoughtfulness, and that's a rare thing. They're usually, all about certain things that happened like 30 years ago, and that's it.
Yeah, no, David, I'll tell you the spirit. I got cats like Garcia and John Kahn and Clarence White and jazzers. So many people that are filling me with spiritual energy that it's become a very natural thing, and I love your candor, the musician's candor. You guys are one of the last real public figures that tell the truth. So enjoy your day with your grandkids, and we'll pick this up down the road. Okay?
Yeah, Tracy went and picked them up. I got to straighten up here so they can come and destroy it. But
yeah, and
we got them violins, and Chad Manning and his wife Catherine have a violin school in Berkeley, and hopefully they'll take to it. But you can't force music on somebody. They have to just really love it and want it, And I wouldn't try to force music on my kids, my grandkids, or anybody else's kids. You gotta, it's just like certain people are, go for it. Like my son Sam, my son Monroe, Monroe's a rocker. He's in a band called Petty Theft here. That's the most popular band in Marin County. They're Tom Petty cover band, but they're real good. They probably sound better than Tom Petty. Sam, he just went to Sweden with Leanne Womack and Europe, actually. He just landed there yesterday. He's he's getting a lot of calls. He loves bluegrass and old-time music, but he had to borrow an electric bass to play this. She wants half upright and half electric. So, hey, he's learning the value of a paying gig. But he's been playing with Brian Sutton and Tim O'Brien, and he's living in Nashville, just got engaged. Hey, it's very full. My life is very full now, and I got to mention my wonderful wife, Tracy, who's an incredible person and an amazing artist, oldtimeyart.com. She does a lot of musical portraiture. Hey.
I might have to interview her, too. Yeah.
So, hey, I appreciate it. Good luck to you, and I look forward to meeting you someday in the flesh.
Me too, dog. Keep it happening, man, all right? Talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.
Bye, bud.
Bye.
We'll be right back.